What's up guys, it's Travis here. In today's video, I want to share 10 tips on how to pass your RES exam. Now firstly, just a disclaimer, I'm not an expert or experienced salesperson. In fact, I just got into the industry. I'm just sharing from my point of view as someone who just recently passed the exam, and also as a form of documentation because I'm a content creator at heart and this is something that I want to do. And I thought this would be useful for my friends or viewers who are aspiring to take the exam and become a real estate salesperson in the future. So I passed the exam in 2 attempts. I took both the April and August exam in 2022 this year, and in my first attempt I passed paper 1 but failed paper 2. Then in my second attempt in August, I was finally able to pass paper 2. So overall, I guess you can say that I passed in 2 attempts, which to me, right, to be honest, is pretty good already because my objective was to pass in as minimal amount of attempts as possible. Of course, you've heard stories that people who passed it once, but of course, given the notoriously low passing rate of this exam, I think those cases are more of the exception than the norm. So this is really just to share for, especially I've heard like anecdotally people who've attempted like 4 times, 5 times, spent a lot of years trying, taken up a lot of courses, bought a lot of notes, and still are not able to pass the exam right. I hope this will be useful for you guys. So without further ado, let's begin with the first tip. So my first tip is when you're studying for the exam right, don't just memorize, you have to fully understand. So why is it important not to just memorize but to fully understand as much as possible? It's because of the nature of the beast. The real estate salesperson exam in Singapore, I think we have a general consensus, is really no joke. It is one of the toughest professional licenses to get in Singapore in my opinion, and the exam questions are designed by the Council of Estate Agency itself, which is the governing body of property agents and property transactions in Singapore. So although on paper, right, people see that it's mostly an MCQ based exam, it's really way trickier than that. If you go through the exam syllabus, you'll realize that a lot of it is testing on your understanding. So basically in the exam syllabus, right, I believe there's 1 to 3. So 1, I think, is the surface level of things that you can memorize and certain facts that you can just like, oh okay, these are facts that you need to know. But the second and third level is truly more on deeper understanding and being able to apply across real life scenarios or case studies. So one of the things I did as I was approaching nearer to my exams, and especially on my second attempt, I started to design my notes in such a way that it is actually answering to each point in the syllabus. So you can extract the CA exam syllabus from the website itself. It's totally free of charge. So what I did was when I was designing my notes, right, I spent time to actually kind of like give a direct answer to each of the syllabus points, but as much as possible, because there'll be some syllabus points where it's kind of like vague and general. For example, like calculations, in which then you have to be familiarized with the formulas and how to calculate for certain topics as well. So to be honest with you, this was a pretty painful process but I also learned a lot, and it gave me structure as well, because as I was going through the syllabus, right, I mean, for my own experience when I was in the course, when I was self-studying, right, it was kind of like, it still followed the syllabus, but it is not like 101% comprehensive, which was the level I know I needed to reach to pass the exam. And one of the things, or I would say traps, that I fell into is because the syllabus is so huge, there's so many things to study, that I found myself just wanting to memorize, you know, just try to cover like chapter 1 as fast as possible, then go to chapter 2, because there's like each paper there's like what, 8 to 10 chapters to cover, right? And especially because I'm trying to pass my first time, I was trying to pass both paper on my first attempt. So basically I was just trying to cram everything, and in that process it became kind of like, okay, just memorize everything without understanding anything at all. So on my second attempt, I realized that wasn't really effective studying for me, because one of the really reality checks, I'll say, is when I did my practice questions, practice papers, right, and I kept on getting certain questions wrong, no matter how much I practice them. Like, you would think that when you're doing practice questions, on the second time you get it correct, because when you're checking the answers, right, you will remember the answers, but that's not the way, because of how difficult the questions are and how they're structured. I believe there were certain questions like I was trying like 5, 6, 7 times, and I keep on getting wrong because I just didn't understand what the question was asking, and memorization just doesn't work at all. So that's the first point. Don't just memorize, fully understand every single topic, every single point. So the second tip is you need to plan in advance and allocate enough time for each chapter, because I'm not sure like how majority of the candidates feel, but the syllabus is so big that it's impossible to cram everything down in like 2 to 3 weeks. I made this mistake in my first attempt. I spent too much time on paper 1. I have no idea why. Maybe it's because I liked the topics in paper 1 more, and I just remember I found paper 2 like really challenging to understand. Okay, so tip number 3, building on to the previous point, paper 1 and paper 2 are significantly different for me. In my first attempt, like I said, I was simply trying to cram everything in. Eventually, when you run through the notes enough, right, you realize that paper 1 is really more on your laws, your facts, and as I reflect now, I guess is why I was able to pass it with just going in with just more of memorization work. So if you're really good at memorizing, right, you'll have a higher chance for paper 1. But paper 2 was totally a different monster for me. It's a different ball game because it required me, as I studied more on my second attempt, it required me to understand more on the processes, different situations, and just how more application and how to apply your knowledge, what you learn in different case studies, in my opinion. So yeah, you just gotta be aware of that and not go into the exam expecting a memory dump, because I guess that's the trap there, right? That's why people fail, especially for paper 2, speaking from my own experience, because the understanding and the application is the hardest part. Now, point number 4 is to allocate enough time in your studying for all the 3 different types of questions in the exams: MCQ, case study, and open-ended. And it is really funny because even in the chat groups, people were saying like nowadays even the MCQs, right, look like the case studies, which is true. Like we were shocked. Like I was shocked personally, like in my both attempts, right, when I flip open the paper, the first question was like, wow, this could be a case study by itself. You know, so my best advice for MCQ type of questions, you gotta just keep practicing and understanding. Now, one of the things I found that worked for me is to keep trying and repeating those questions that I kept getting wrong. So I just kept practicing those so-called weak questions until I mastered them. Because this is really time allocation as well, there are certain basic facts, right, that once you understand, once you lock it in your mind, right, you got it forever already. You already know it. Things like the 4P2G or your fines or KO requirements and things like that. I'd rather you spend more time on the super challenging, like for me, right, the super challenging stuff was like on block or grants mastery or even calculation, shortfall calculation, GST was a huge weak area for me, you know. So those were the areas, my weak areas, that I drew in a lot. So what I did was I kept creating notes on topics that I was weak in to reinforce my knowledge. And then next, for case studies, right, you just gotta keep practicing from curated sources. One tip I have for you is to head over to CEA website, and there's an entire section of the latest case studies which it will be strongly recommended to go through at least once. I know like one case study can take like 20 minutes, half an hour to fully understand, but as much as you can, just read through once, cover all the case studies. Now, even if you don't fully understand like certain tiny details, right, what this really helps me is that it gives me like the general expectation of, whoa, these are actually real life case studies. It's as complicated as the exam and what the exam is going to come out itself. Next, for open-ended, right, I really don't know how others practice for open-ended, but one of the things that I did, and this worked for me lah, once in a few days, right, I kind of like, so I created this Microsoft Word, and then I just dumped all the keywords, like all the important words you kept on seeing all the time, and I just kept on adding to this list. And it's not questions, it's just word. Yeah, so I just opened up the document itself. So it's literally called Words You Might Want to Know. Alright, I'll overlay this in the screen right now so you can see misleading, rescinded, interest, land acquisition act, which has been tested before, compulsory acquisition, blah blah blah, all the way. So what I was trying to do is to train my mind to familiarize with all these single words for open-ended, because if you don't know, right, open-ended is 10 questions, and then it's basically a sentence or it may be a question, but you gotta kind of like fill in the blank. So I gotta be very sharp with this, and I gotta train my mind. My worst fear, guys, was that during my exam, I go blank when I see the blank. Like for example, question 1 of open-ended, blah 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 blah, blank. Oh my gosh, like I believe if you drill to a standard level, the answer is just like that. It will come out just like that. Like Land Acquisition Act or Law Society of Singapore's Conditions of Sale. You would know, but if you don't know, that's 2 marks gone, you know? Like if you can't connect that this open-ended is asking for COS 2020, you will not have the answer, and that's 2 marks gone. That's as harsh and as cruel the exam is. Okay, so as painful as it was, I drilled it in. Now, point number 5 is pretty straightforward. I learn from as many sources as I can available. So I'm just listing all the sources that I learned from. Okay, of course, firstly, my course note, my instructor, but I also went out of the way. Now, for me, there was a kind of like a gap year between graduating from my course and taking the actual exam. So I kind of like forgot a lot of things already, and the notes didn't help much. So I had to go out of the way to kind of like find just from sources online, YouTube video. I joined Telegram group, curated notes, and even I was fortunate to have my own mentor, so I asked a lot from him, and even study groups. Basically, if you really want this right, there's just a lot of sources, a lot of groups that you can reach out to curate your notes, to get your practice questions, and to get your understanding in. You really gotta have this like 360 degree of knowledge and understanding going into the exam. Okay, so point number 6, right? Building on the earlier point, you gotta practice as many questions as possible. I think this is one of the most important and straightforward tips that I can give you. This is where all your hard work and time and sacrifice goes in. Practice, practice, practice. Okay, so not just your course notes questions, those are definitely not sufficient. Those are more of like examples for you to have a bare minimum understanding, but those are not exam grade. Those are not exam level. So if you just do a bit of search, right, I'm sure you can find many online sources of curated questions, exam questions like previous 10-year series or whatever have you. And however you get your hands on it, keep practicing. Now, on one hand is to practice so that you have the understanding and you get your questions correct, but it's also equally important to give you a feel of the kind of exam questions that will come out. And also, I found this late into my revision. Do you know nowadays there's even RES apps? Yeah, the phone app. I think there's 1 or 2 y'all can go and download, and then basically it's just curated questions. The one that I found was pretty good, like it was exam standard. So given the time you have, as much as possible, practice. Okay, point number 7, CEA case studies. Now, I know I touched on this earlier, but once again, it's really to get you into the right framework for the kinds of cases and questions that you can expect in the exam itself. Because case study is a pretty big part of the exam, and stamina-wise, it's pretty draining. Like, I'm not kidding this, those who've taken the exam, you guys know, alright, in the actual exam, the whole case study, the case study with the reading can be 1 whole page, even 2 pages if I remember correctly, and it's several paragraphs. And then you gotta train your mind to extract the information, the key salient information, or who is the agent, who is the buyer, seller, what are the red flags to look out for, what are the main points. So by understanding the real life case study examples, this really will train your mind to be able to perform. So tip number 8, and I found this tip, this was shared in some groups. This tip is super useful. Go through websites as much as you can. We are talking about your government website, CEA website, HDB website, URA website, SLA website, and other websites relating to real estate in Singapore. Now, I know some people may be thinking like, is this even necessary? My course note is already this thick, but for me, it was absolutely necessary. One of the things it did for me, right, is it solidified my understanding of certain topics that I was weak in, and it gave me a full picture. Because like, your government policies, right, your grants, like sometimes you just see the grants on the slides, and then you just, oh, these are the grants. But then if you go to the actual HDB grants website, they'll have a full explanation of the why, the eligibility, and even examples that some course notes may not have. And one of the things that I'm just thinking now, like certain things, right, that are actually pretty important, pretty salient in let's say HDB example, in the HDB website, right, this is my experience, they may just be footnotes, okay, footnotes or asterisks in the course note itself, which I think your instructors will encourage you to then go to the websites to get a full understanding. So even some more examples from my case, right, like the en bloc process. I found that my course notes or whatever revision classes not enough for my understanding. Maybe it's just en bloc is so difficult for me to understand. I had to go to the Strata's title board website itself. Then I got a full picture and a very clear picture of the entire en bloc process. Okay, so the second last point is don't be shy to ask questions. Seriously, don't be shy. You gotta just leave your face out of the way and just ask. There's many support groups out there, I believe, even if you have your own friends, your own agencies. Now, why it's so important to ask questions? Based on the syllabus, I hate to harp on it, but I think it's pretty impossible for anyone to know every single thing, especially if you have no experience in real estate prior. So basically, right, asking questions is a very, very fast and time-saving way for you to get your answers and your doubts clarified. And number 2, right, when you have access to this beehive of knowledge, tapping into thousands thousands of people who are also studying or have passed the exam already. Don't make the mistake like me, because first time round I didn't ask if at all. Like I thought that I was good enough, so I didn't clarify much. But second time round, I know sometimes it can be embarrassing. Like you think that, hey, is this a stupid question? Come on, man, if you want to pass the exam enough, there's nothing stupid. So second time round, I just ask, even stupid, whatever kind of question, even question people asked before, right? I just ask, because like, even for questions that people asked before, the way that it's answered, they may understand from that angle, but there's certain other things that you don't understand from this angle. So you want to ask from your angle so that you understand. Okay, now the last point, and this is perhaps the most important, is mindset shift. So the truth is, right, going into the exam, you really gotta want this. You have to sacrifice the time. I believe, right, most people who fail is because they didn't study enough. Why they didn't study enough? Because they are giving reasons or excuses, or their full-time job is just too comfortable, or you know, they're just doing this for fun. I can't speak for everybody, and once again, those who pass a first time round, they are the exception rather than most people. For me, I wasn't very good in school also. I hate studying, but I really wanted this license. Okay, so I sacrificed, and this is just my sharing. Okay, you really have to sacrifice time daily and consistently. For me, right, the 2 or 3 weeks leading up to both my exams in April and August, right, I put everything aside. Every day I just wake up, study, eat, sleep, repeat. Wake up, eat, study, sleep, repeat. Wake up, eat, study, sleep, repeat for 2 weeks. No kidding. Okay, no time for friends, no time for wife, no time for whatever. And also, in my case, I repeat, in my case, I don't have a 9 to 5 job. I'm self-employed. Imagine if I was fully holding on to a job. I don't know how people do that. There would be no way I could have passed. Okay, once again, for me, this is not like a side thing or night class or whatever. You gotta go all out. Okay, so for me as a self-employed, I basically had to stop all my work in the like 2 months leading up to the April and August exam, which basically means zero income. In 2022, I basically sacrificed my income, my earnings, to get my license. Totally no regret at all. And it also depends on your individual motivation. Like for my motivation, right, if I don't get my license, okay, I don't get to start this RAS career. And also, I have mortgage, I have bills. Okay, so if I don't pass this as soon as possible, then continue to suffer. Simple as that. So do or die. For me, I had that do or die mentality. You know, some people have children. So what if they don't pass the exam? And just to stretch this out a bit, if they pass the exam and they are new agent, and if they don't provide good service, they don't close deals, how are they gonna feed their children? Okay, so I'm not trying to be, you know, very extreme, or I don't know how you feel watching this. Maybe this is shocking to you, but just to give you an insight into the kind of mindset that you need to have. Okay guys, so I hope you found this video useful. I just want to leave you guys with one last quote that I actually use as my phone's wallpaper. I found it to be incredibly motivating and driving me. And this may not work for you, okay? It's nothing like crazy, like mind-opening or sophisticated one. It basically is this, alright? Studying sucks a lot less than failing. Simple as that. Like to me, when I was looking at my phone every day, I wake up my phone, studying sucks, man. Wow, it's 5 hours in. Today studying sucks, man. But then I think it's gonna suck a lot worse if you fail and you gotta wait 2-3 months again. Don't even know if you can get the next slot. Studying sucks a lot less than failing. Has such a good feeling now. Pass finally. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer to the best of my understanding. See you guys